The Travel Lodge on Route 66 had seen better days. Cracked neon signs flickered occasionally, casting erratic shadows over the peeling paint and chipped concrete. When Robert Landis accepted a job as a night clerk, he didn't expect much beyond a meager paycheck and an endless cycle of insomniac travelers. He was wrong. His first night behind the desk felt uneventful, just the buzzing of fluorescent lights and the hum of the ancient ice machine. An hour after midnight, a pair of glinting headlights pierced through the windshield, illuminating the cracked parking lot. A rusty sedan came to a halt, and an elderly man stepped out, his figure stooping and fragile. "Check in for one, please," he rasped, placing a bony hand on the desk as he filled out the registration form. Robert noticed the man's trembling fingers as he scribbled his name. "Room 7, Robert said, handing over the key with a faint smile. The old man shuffled away, mumbling incoherently. As Robert returned to his paperwork, he heard something, a low, scratching sound that seemed to emanate from beyond the walls. He paused, listening intently. The noise was like claws scraping against wood, persistent and disquieting. The sound stopped suddenly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, and the minutes crawled by. A few guests came and went, nothing out of the ordinary, until 2 a.m., when a piercing scream shattered the stillness. Robert shot up from his seat, heart racing. It came from room 7. He dashed down the dimly lit corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead as he reached the door. "Sir?" he called, knocking gently. No response. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. With no answer, he pushed the door open, revealing a scene far from what he expected. The room was a mess, furniture was overturned, and the elderly man lay on the floor, eyes wide in horror, mouth agape as if he had just witnessed something unspeakable. Robert rushed to him, but something caught his eye. In the far corner, shadows seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally, coalescing into a figure just beyond perception. Before he could react, the figure lunged forward. It bore no face, just a void, a revelation of nightmares waiting to be unleashed. Robert stumbled back, heart pounding as he dragged the old man away from the figure, his instincts fighting against the surreal horror. Suddenly, another bang echoed in the corridor. His co-worker, Jackson, burst through the door, breathless. "Call 911!" he shouted. "We—" But the figure was upon them now, a swirling mass of darkness that swallowed the light whole. Jackson's scream was cut off as the figure absorbed him, leaving only the echo of terror. Robert, paralyzed with fear, scrambled to his feet and bolted for the exit, the remaining guests' doors creaking ominously, as if they, too, had heard the call of something dark. He reached the front door, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, whispers began to fill the air, soft, enticing, promising knowledge and power, but laced with malice. He turned to face room 7, the door now standing wide open. The old man was gone, the shadows laughing, tempting him with truth. In that moment, a realization dawned. The motel wasn't simply a place of respite, it was a gateway, a trap for anyone who dared linger too long. And Robert was its newest keeper, destined to unravel the secrets of the darkness lurking within. The old Oakwood Inn had stood for decades, a relic of a bygone era, with creaky floorboards and faded wallpaper that whispered tales of all the guests who had passed through its doors. It was the kind of place where the walls seemed to breathe, drawing in secrets and exhaling shadows. Oliver, the night clerk, had manned the lobby desk for nearly a year, and while he'd seen his share of eccentric travelers, he never anticipated the night he would meet the one who would haunt him for the rest of his days. It was a dreary October evening. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a mournful spirit. Oliver sat behind the desk, flipping through a dog-eared book on local legends, half listening to the muted television that flickered in the corner. The inn had been quiet that night, a calm before the storm of Halloween. Just as he considered closing up early, the grandfather clock chimed ominously, and the front door creaked open. A chill swept through the lobby as a figure stepped inside. Oliver looked up to find a tall man, cloaked entirely in shadows, his face obscured by the brim of a wide hat.
"Good evening,"
the stranger said, his voice gravelly, smooth like dark chocolate, though it gave Oliver an inexplicable sense of dread. The man's clothing was outdated, reminiscent of a Victorian ball. "Welcome to Oakwood Inn. How can I assist you tonight?" Oliver's usual pleasantries were tinged with unease.
"I seek shelter,"
the stranger replied, his smile stretching just a bit too wide.
"I'll need a room for the night."
"Of course. I just need your name and identification," Oliver said, reaching for the check-in book. The man hesitated, the flickering lights above casting unsettling shadows on his visage.
"You may refer to me as Mr. Gray," he said,
his eyes glinting with something dark and unfathomable. As Oliver scribbled the name, he stole a glance at Mr. Gray's hands. They were unnaturally long, fingers tapering into sharp points that seemed to curl and flex like dried twigs. "Room 204 will be fine," Oliver managed to say, handing over the key as an eerie shiver danced down his spine. "Do you need assistance with your bags?"
"No,"
Mr. Gray replied, turning on his heel with a fluid grace that sent a jolt of unease through Oliver. The man's long coat swept behind him like smoke as he moved toward the stairs. Hours passed, yet sleep eluded Oliver. Every creak of the inn seemed to echo louder, reverberating in the stillness. Finally, the clock struck midnight, its chimes a malicious reminder that something was off. The peace shattered when the fire alarm screamed to life, jolting Oliver from his chair. He rushed to find the source of the chaos, his heart racing. He stumbled, disoriented, down dim corridors, drawn toward the source of the alarm. As he reached room 204, the door swung open, revealing a sight that curdled his blood. Mr. Gray stood in the center of the room, the blackened walls pulsating with dread. Shadows writhed around his form like tendrils of smoke, and the air turned heavy with an ancient, suffocating malevolence. "What have you done?" Oliver gasped in horror. Mr. Gray turned slowly, his smile now a wicked grin, revealing teeth sharp and jagged.
"I bring stories, young clerk," he hissed, "and the night is just beginning."
With that, he vanished into the dark, leaving Oliver alone, a witness to an unspeakable malevolence, forever trapped in the echoes of the Oakwood Inn. As the alarm faded, he realized that sometimes the stories that haunt you are not just tales, but the shadows of those who once walked among us. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a dusky glow over the desolate neighborhood of Elmwood Heights. Ivy climbed the walls of dilapidated houses, their windows clouded with dust, obscuring any sign of life within. As 18-year-old Mira strolled down the cracked pavement, earbuds nestled snugly in her ears, she brushed aside the unease that clung to the air like a thick fog. It was just another evening, and the world outside her headphones felt distant and muted. But then she heard it, a faint whimper cutting through the music. Instinct kicked in, and she pulled the earbuds out, scanning her surroundings. The sound seemed to come from behind an old flaking fence that surrounded what used to be a small park. Curiosity piqued, she stepped off the path and pushed through the overgrown brush. Nestled in the weeds was a small, dirt-caked puppy, its fur a matted brown and its eyes wide with fear. Mira knelt beside it, heart pounding. The little creature looked up, tongue lolling as if it were in desperate need of a friend. It wagged its tail, though weakly, and Mira felt a wave of compassion wash over her. "Hey there, little guy," she whispered, gently reaching out. The puppy flinched, but made no move to escape, its skinny body quivering slightly. She carefully scooped it up, cradling the trembling form against her chest. "I'll take care of you," she promised, though she couldn't help but wonder what had happened to its owner. As she turned to leave, a raspy voice echoed through the trees, sending chills down her spine.
Don't take him.
Mira froze, her breath hitching as dread filled the air. The voice was laden with a darkness that echoed against the hollowed surroundings. She squinted into the twilight shadows, but there was nothing but trees and silence. Panic surged through her, but the puppy nuzzled into her embrace, grounding her. She couldn't just leave him. Urgency propelled her home, and as she settled into her modest apartment, she bathed the pup, working carefully to remove the dirt and tangles. The momentary comfort soothed them both, the little creature curling into her lap while she cradled him, whispering names. She settled on Rusty, but the inexplicable unease came creeping back through the night. As Mira turned down the lights, shadows danced across her walls. She tried to shake it off, focusing on Rusty, who was promptly curled up beside her, snoring lightly. She found herself drifting off, lulled by the steady sound. A muffled cry jolted her awake. Heart racing, she looked around, only to find the room empty. Rusty was gone. Panic surged in her chest as she jumped from her bed, scanning the room. The fuzzy outline of the puppy beneath her bed cast a stark contrast against the darkness. Rusty? Tentatively, she reached down and pulled him into her arms. But something felt off. He was heavier, the warmth that had surrounded them oozing away. Looking down, she gasped. Rusty's eyes had turned a sickly yellow, glassy and void of warmth, with a grinning mouth that revealed rows of jagged teeth. A low growl emanated from his throat, sending primal terror racing through her veins. The voice echoed again, closer this time.
You shouldn't have taken him.
The lights flickered, casting shadows that twisted and elongated, revealing lurking figures among the walls, watching, waiting. And as Rusty's growl deepened, Mira realized, too late, that she wasn't just fighting to save an abandoned puppy. She had stolen something far more sinister, a darkness that thrived on desperation and fear. And in that moment, she understood. In this forsaken place, once you choose to care, you were never alone. In the small town of Ashwood Hollow, every family had a wooden doll that looked exactly like them, crafted by the enigmatic toymaker who arrived one stormy night years ago. One chilling afternoon, Mia noticed that her doll was grinning unnaturally, its eyes gleaming with malevolence as she felt an icy grip around her throat. Hours later, her family found her lifeless body, while the doll, now wearing a sinister smile, stood silently on the shelf, perfectly still, as if it had been the real Mia all along. Number 1. Lily had always been drawn to the strays that roamed in and out of her small town. With a heart that was frequently too big for her own good, she often spent her evenings roaming the streets, keeping an eye out for any forgotten creatures that might have been left out in the cold. One rainy evening she stumbled upon a scraggly black cat perched on the edge of a crumbling stone wall, its green eyes gleaming like glass beads in the dim light. "Hey there," she whispered, crouching down. The cat blinked slowly, a gesture that felt almost intentional, as if it were sizing her up. Its fur was matted and soaked, but she noticed an unusual aura surrounding it. Something magnetic, yet a little bit eerie as well. Lily extended her hand, and the cat inched closer, nuzzling against her palm. "You're all alone, huh?" she murmured, feeling a strange connection. It seemed almost grateful. As she stood to leave, the cat followed her with an almost determined stride. Without much thought, Lily decided to take the cat home. She named it Shadow, a fitting title for its inky black fur and the way it slinked around her dimly lit apartment. That night, as she fell asleep, she heard a low purring vibrating through her dreams. Days turned into weeks, and Shadow became a fixture in Lily's life, but not everything was perfect. Lily noticed small things, most of them normal for having a cat around. A scratched up sofa, a toppled vase, but the most unsettling thing of all, that definitely wasn't expected, were the whispers she thought she heard at midnight from the kitchen. She brushed it off as her imagination. After all, it was just a cat. One night, an unbearable storm ripped through the town. Wind howled like a banshee, shaking the windows. Suddenly, a loud crash came from the kitchen, and Lily jolted awake. Heart pounding, she rushed to investigate, Shadow trailing closely behind. There, strewn across the tiled floor, was her kitchen knife, its tip glinting dangerously in the dim light as the wind howled outside. Another crash made her jump, and she turned to see Shadow diving toward a chair in the corner. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed. But as she approached, her stomach twisted. The shadows in the corner shifted, contorted into shapes too grotesque to recognize. Tendrils of darkness slithered from the wall, and she caught glimpses of multiple moving eyes glinting back at her from deep within. "What the—" Lily gasped as Shadow leaped in front of her, hissing. The creature's whispers grew louder, threatening to consume her sanity. Realization hit her like a cold wave. Shadow wasn't really just a cat. It was a conduit, a gatekeeper. In the chaos from the corner, a darkness that longed for release. Lily backed away, terror rooting her to the spot. No, no, this can't be real. The shadows surged, pulling at her limbs, whispering promises of power and solace. She fought to regain her footing, looking at Shadow, who stood defiant, fur bristling, appearing as if it were ready to defend her, or possibly only wanting to protect the horrific secrets it harbored. With a trembling resolve, she grabbed the kitchen knife and aimed it at the darkness. "Get back!" she screamed, as the shadows recoiled in fear. Instead of escaping, they lunged at Shadow, who let out an earth-shattering cry that echoed through the storm. Then, silence. The shadows receded, leaving only the cat, now relaxed and purring as if nothing had transpired. But Lily knew better. That night she locked the door and listened to the rain, realizing it was not just her life that Shadow had entered, it was something far darker. A sudden chill crept over her as she felt the weight of a hidden danger, knowing she had unwittingly taken home a protector and a prison for something even more sinister. Number 2. The storm had just lulled in as they arrived at the sprawling, dilapidated estate that had once been a luxurious hotel. Now it stood shrouded in the shadows, its grandeur faded but still possessing an eerie charm. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with musty air and the scent of mildew. The group, 5 friends seeking adventure before the school year began, was thrilled and a bit frightened, but they quickly settled into the spirit of exploration. Their first night was spent sharing ghost stories in the dimly lit lobby, but a strange presence lurked in the corners of their minds. They couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. After a few rounds of drinks, they decided to investigate the upper floors, where the doors creaked ominously and the desk notes danced in the air. "Is that the maid?" whispered Jenna, pointing to a figure sweeping the hallway floor at the far end. The woman had a long braid falling down her back and wore a simple uniform that seemed out of place in the dilapidated grandeur. The friends watched her for a moment, an odd aura surrounding her. "Let's ask her about the history of the place," suggested Tom, his bravado instigated by alcohol. As they approached, the maid looked up. A deep, unsettling gaze met them. Rather than speak, she merely clutched the broom tightly and nodded slightly as if she recognized them. Feeling uncomfortable yet compelled, Tom stepped forward. "Hi, we're staying here for the weekend. Can you tell us any spooky stories about this hotel?" The maid's lips curled into a smile, but it felt more like a smirk. "Be careful what you wish for," she said softly, her voice smooth as silk but laden with something dark. Later that night, as the storm raged outside, strange things began to happen. The group felt disoriented. Shadows swirled in the corners, and whispers echoed in the air. Jenna, feeling a growing unease, suggested they leave early. The others mocked her unease, but the laughter faded as they heard a loud crash from the hallway. A loud bang followed by a raspy voice calling out their names. "Is anyone there?" Tom shouted, but only silence answered. Curiosity and dread intermingled as they crept toward the sound. They reached the corner where they'd last seen the maid and found her kneeling over something on the ground. As they approached, their skin prickled. She looked up at them with eyes that glimmered like molten gold. In the flickering light, they saw the shadowy outlines of strange symbols swirling around her. "You shouldn't have disturbed my work," she said, her voice echoing in the empty hall. "What are you talking about?" Jenna stammered. The maid rose slowly, and it was then that they saw the broom had transformed into a gnarled staff, the delicate wooden handle woven with living vines. With each wave of her arm, the air thickened, and a chilling wind swept through the hallway. "You've all taken from this place without respect. It feasts on your greed." Her voice turned sharper, almost melodic. "But now it will collect its due." Fear gripped the group as they shrank back, realizing too late the power they had taunted. Every ghost story they told became a shackling curse upon them. The maid, no longer merely a servant but a guardian of ancient secrets, smiled wickedly. "Show gratitude to those who serve you, young ones," she whispered as shadows began to envelop them, "or you may find yourself in a tale of your own." The storm raged outside, the thunder crashing as the echoes of their laughter faded into silence, leaving only an empty hallway where the witch of the hotel remained, ready to enchant the next unwitting visitors. Number 3. The wind howled around the dilapidated cabin where Mia, Jake, Aiden, and Lila had decided to spend the weekend. It was an old hunting lodge, long abandoned and rumored to be haunted. They had dismissed the tales, eager instead to enjoy a brief escape from their mundane lives. But as the sun set, the atmosphere grew heavy, and the forest whispered secrets beyond the trees. It was Jake who stumbled upon the hidden entrance, a trapdoor in the floorboards of the cabin's dusty kitchen. His curiosity piqued, he pried it open, revealing a dark staircase that spiraled downwards into the earth. The others exchanged nervous glances, but, emboldened by the thrill of their adventure, they followed Jake into the darkness. They descended the stairs cautiously, the air growing colder and mustier with each step. Looking on their phones, they cast weak beams of light that danced against the damp walls. Finally, they reached the bottom. The space opened into a cavernous chamber, its walls glistening with the strange luminescent fungi that pulsed with an eerie blue light. In the center of the room stood an ancient, intricately carved archway, covered in symbols none of them recognized. A sense of unease settled among them, but curiosity propelled them closer. "What do you think it is?" Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It looks like a portal," Aiden replied, stepping closer, his heart racing with anticipation. He reached out, fingertips brushing against the cool stone frame. The moment he touched it, a rumble echoed through the chamber, making the ground shake beneath their feet. Suddenly, a portal shimmered into existence, displaying glimpses of a vibrant world on the other side. Colors more vivid than any they had ever seen before, a landscape that twisted and writhed as if alive. The group exchanged excited looks. "Let's go in," Jake urged, already stepping forward. "No," Mia said, fear creeping into her voice. "We don't know what could be on the other side." But Jake was undeterred, stepping through the archway before anyone could stop him. The moment he did, a cacophony of sounds erupted from the portal, a chorus of laughter mingling with anguished screams. Panic surged through the group as they watched Jake become engulfed in swirling shadows, his figure twisting as he merged with the light. "Jake!" Aiden shouted, reaching for him, but it was too late. Jake disappeared entirely, leaving only an unsettling echo of his laughter behind. "We have to go get him," Lila cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. "We can't. We don't know what that is," Mia replied, grasping Lila's arm. But Aiden's resolve hardened. "I'm going. He's my friend." With that, he took a deep breath and stepped through the archway. One by one, the portal flickered with each step they could not take. "We should leave," Mia screamed, tugging Lila away. Yet it was too late. They stood paralyzed as the air grew weighty and an unearthly chill enveloped them. With a final flicker, the portal dimmed. A hushed silence filled the chamber, save for their distant howl that echoed like a mournful wail. Mia and Lila turned to each other, realization dawning like an ominous shadow. They were alone, and the forest above was whispering their names. The archway twisted, shifting at the edge of perception as dark visions of what lay beyond beckoned with irresistible allure. The decision to explore the unknown had irrevocably changed them. sealing their fates as the wind outside howled with their unending screams. Number 4. The sun dipped low behind the jagged silhouette of the abandoned warehouse, bathing the crumbling exterior in a sickly orange glow. Mara, Ben, Lena, and Josh stood outside the weathered wooden doors, their breath creating little clouds in the crisp autumn air. They had heard whispers about a traveling theater that showcased the most terrifying films you could ever imagine, premiering only in the dead of night. "Come on, it's just a movie. What's the worst that could happen?" Ben said, his smile faltering as he cast a glance back at the gloomy shadows. Mara shrugged. "Yeah, but have you heard the stories? They say the films trap you, that you can't escape until the end. It's all part of the experience." "Sounds like a gimmick to me," Josh scoffed, pushing open the creaking door. The air inside was thick, saturated with the smell of musty velvet and old popcorn. Flickering candlelight illuminated the narrow aisles, and the faint murmur of hushed voices resonated from the darkness. They found seats in the third row, the velvet lining frayed and stained from years of neglect. As the lights dimmed and the screen flickered to life, a chilling silence enveloped the crowd. Each of the friends exchanged nervous glances, the jovial atmosphere shifting as the film began. It was a grainy black and white movie titled Into the Abyss. The tale unfolded with unsettling ease, following a group of friends much like them who stumbled into a forgotten world of horror. Uncanny events occurred on screen, echoing the unspoken fears of the audience. Shadows lurked in the corners, whispers threaded through the plot like thorns. About halfway through, something changed. The air turned electric, heavy with an unshakable tension. Mara squeezed Lena's hand, her heart thumping in sync with the thundering soundtrack. "Is this part of it?" Lena whispered, her voice trembling. Before anyone could respond, the screen flickered violently, blinding white flashes erupting like lightning. The audience gasped, and the film's audio warped into a jarring cacophony. Unseen forces seemed to awaken, tugging at the edges of the reality they once knew. Suddenly, the theater lights blazed back to life, illuminating the horrified faces of the other attendees, but not one of them remained seated. Instead, they stood, eerily silent but transfixed, their eyes glassy and devoid of humanity. A whirlwind of panic surged through the group as the volume of the film decreased to a whisper. "Stay with us." The friends scrambled to escape, but their exit was shrouded in darkness. Shadows surged forward, melding into grotesque shapes, and clawing hands reached out. Ben shouted, grabbing Josh's arm, "Run!" But no matter how fast they moved, the shadows pursued, twisting their forms to mimic those they sought to ensnare. Lena screamed as a piercing cry ricocheted off the walls, the sound a mix of terror and desperation. With nowhere left to go, the four huddled together, their breaths quickening. This is not just a movie, Mara realized, her voice barely audible over the oppressive silence of the audience. We're a part of it now. In that moment, the heavy film reel began anew, dragging them down into its twisted nightmare, a loop without an escape. As the laughter of unknown entities echoed through the darkness, Mara knew one terrifying truth. This time, there were no credits to roll. Number 5. The wind howled through the skeletal remains of the abandoned carnival, a rusted Ferris wheel towering ominously against the pale moon. Olivia, Jake, Mia, and Tom pulled their jackets tighter around themselves, a mix of excitement and apprehension coursing through their veins. The townsfolk often spoke of dreadful happenings at the carnival, rumors of blood-curdling screams that echoed through the night, and the mysteriously vanishing patrons. "Let's just get in, snap some photos, and get the hell out," Olivia said, her voice barely hiding her nervousness. The group had come to document the haunted place for their documentary assignment, but they felt the weight of dread mingled with the thrill of exploration. As they neared the entrance, they pushed aside the chain-link fence, its rusted links groaning in protest. The smell of decay and overgrown weeds lingered as they stepped onto the cracked pavement. "Look at this place. It's perfect for horror-themed TikToks," Jake exclaimed, pulling his phone from his pocket. "Let's just be careful," Mia added, uneasy at the flickering shadows that danced around them. "Remember what the old-timer at the diner said? What happened to the performers?"
Come on, it's just stories that scare kids, Tom scoffed, bouncing up to the dilapidated carousel, its once vibrant colors faded to ghostly hues. Without warning, the carousel creaked, its music box playing a hollow, melancholic tune that echoed in the chilly night. As they filmed, laughter ripped through the silence, but no one was around. Did you hear that? Mia whispered, her eyes wide as she scanned the area. It's just the wind, Jake said, but his voice trembled slightly. The laughter morphed into agonizing wails, echoing like tortured spirits begging for release. Maybe we should head back, Mia suggested, her skin crawling. Suddenly, shadows flitted at the edges of their vision, figures lurking in the darkness. The air thickened with dread, and they felt as if unseen eyes were boring into their souls. Tom laughed nervously. Guys, this is just a prank, right? Another wail pierced the air, silencing his laughter. The figures emerged, grotesque and unnatural, limbs twisted at impossible angles, faces obscured in shadow. They moved like marionettes, jerkily advancing toward the group, their laughter now a haunting cacophony. Run! Olivia screamed, the adrenaline kicking in. They dashed back toward the entrance, but the carnival seemed to warp around them. Every path spiraled deeper into the heart of the cursed ground. Jake stumbled, falling to the cracked pavement. Help! I can't. The moment he hit the ground, the shadows lunged, their twisted mouths stretching impossibly wide. His screams were swallowed by the night as his friends tore themselves from the phantom's grasp. They reached the carousel, breathless and terrified, but it began to spin, smoke rising from the center. The wails intensified, merging into a symphony of despair, clawing at their minds. Tom, do something, Mia shadowed as she struggled against the pull of the swirling mist. Tom, shaking, grabbed Olivia's arm and they leaped into a nearby booth, seeking refuge. But the figures surrounded them, their forms flickering in and out as if they were made of smoke. Their laughter echoed in the air, and in that moment they understood the curse. The carnival fed on fear, and they were its latest victims. One by one they were pulled into the night, lost forever to the shadows. The carnival stood silent once more, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting souls to wander into its cursed embrace. Number 6. Jake Malone had never meant to end up in Ironwood Penitentiary. A petty crime, breaking into an abandoned shop to swipe a few beers, had landed him in a stint behind bars, a mere 6 months of time served. But as his bus rolled up to the cracked, imposing driveway of the prison, he looked through the barbed wire and cracked stone walls and felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the chill in the air. Ironwood was more than just a prison. It was a relic of a dark history steeped in haunting tales. The guards spoke of them in hushed tones, the kind of stories that kept inmates awake at night. It's not the walls that keep you in, they'd say with twisted grins, but the whispers. Jake shrugged off the warnings, chalking them up to typical prison folklore. After all, he was only here for a short while. He was determined to keep his head down, serve his time, and get back to the real world. Yet, as the heavy iron door slammed shut behind him and the clanking echoed through the bleak corridor, a sense of foreboding crept into the back of his mind. That first night was restless. As he lay on the thin mattress in his cramped cell, his ears strained against the silence. The only sound was the occasional groan of the building, a reminder of its age. Around midnight, however, he was awoken by the fluttering of unseen whispers, soft and insistent, weaving through the bars like fingers in the night. Leave, leave, they seemed to chant, growing louder, filling the cold air surrounding him. Jake shut upright, heart racing. But the only source of illumination was the dim light cast by the flickering bulb above him. The next day, during the meager hours allowed for recreation, Jake met a group of inmates who spoke freely about the place's notorious past. They told tales of the Whistling Man, a spirit said to have been a murderer forever seeking penance. Many claimed to have encountered him, his mournful cries echoing around the dark corners of the prison, begging for release. Determined to dismiss the tales as mere superstition, Jake buried himself in chores and reading, but the voices became a constant companion, always lurking, always beckoning. Every night they emerged from the shadows, heavy with sorrow and desperation. He began to see flashes at the edge of his vision, figures moving in the dark, faces contorted in anguish. One fateful evening, unable to resist, Jake followed the whispers down the darkened hallways. They led him to the abandoned wing of the prison, long sealed off from the rest. His heart thudded loudly against his ribcage as he reached for the door, which creaked ominously open, as if it had been waiting. Inside, the air thickened with despair. The whispers crescendoed, reaching a figured pitch. Reaching deeper into the darkness, Jake could make out the outline of a man, translucent and sorrowful, his eyes pleading. "Help me," the apparition murmured, a breathless plea that gripped Jake's soul. Fear surged through him, and he wanted to turn around to flee, but he was rooted to the spot. "Please, help me escape," the whistling man implored, his voice like broken glass. Suddenly, the walls began to shake, and an ancient rage enveloped the space around Jake. The faint rays of moonlight barely penetrated the gloom, transforming the whispers into deafening screams. All at once, Jake understood the truth. The whispers were not about escape, they were a warning. With a shrill cry, he stumbled back, tearing himself from the spirit's grip. He bolted down the hall, the echoes of anguished pleas chasing him all the way back to his cell. He relived that moment every night, haunted by the realization that Ironwood was not just a prison, it was a trap, ensnaring souls forever to linger within its walls, unable to escape the darkness. Number 7. The wind howled through the dilapidated halls of Raven's Hollow Penitentiary, a sound that echoed like a mourning cry. For Officer James Fletcher, his night shift had taken on an unsettling air. As the new guard, he had heard the whispered rumors about the prison, how prisoners seemed to fade into the shadows, and how deaths were reported at an alarming rate. But folklore of the damned had never truly restrained his resolve. As Fletcher made his rounds, the flickering fluorescent lights cast erratic shadows on the cold, damp walls. He felt a chill, but dismissed it as a mere draft from the aging infrastructure. His first stop was Cell Block C, home to some of the most dangerous criminals. The block was notorious for its violence, but tonight it seemed hauntingly silent. He walked past the cells, peering in cautiously. Most of the inmates slept, but one cell, C5, held his attention. The prisoner, a burly man with tattoos crawling up his arms, stood by the bars, an unsettling expression set on his face. Fletcher felt a stirring of unease as the man leaned closer, hands gripping the bars like a caged animal. "Let me out of here," the prisoner hissed, his eyes wide with a desperation that pricked at Fletcher's instinct for danger. "You have no idea what it's like. They come at night and they take us." Fletcher chuckled nervously, raising an eyebrow. "You're just having nightmares, buddy. Just try to get some sleep." He turned away, but the man's voice followed him, unraveling the tension within his gut. "Sleep? You really think that's an option? They can smell fear, and you smell afraid." Night crept deeper, silence thickening the air, and the guard found himself unnerved by the prisoner's words, feigning indifference as he continued with his rounds. The rest of Cell Block C seemed alive with a strange energy that he couldn't shake, a lingering presence at the edge of his consciousness. Halfway through, a sudden noise splintered to silence, scraping sounds that reverberated through the empty hall. Fletcher stiffened, his heart racing. It sounded like fingernails dragging against cement. He traced the noise back towards C5. The prisoner was gone from his cell. Panic surged through him. Fletcher dashed towards the source of the sound, praying it was just a risk he had failed to calculate. A pale light flickered overhead as he reached C5, finding the cell door ajar. He peered inside. The prisoner's bed was untouched, but little else remained within, except for a smudge of something dark that lay in the corner. It smelled metallic, like rust and decay. Suddenly, the lights went out, plunging the block into blackness. Fletcher fumbled for his flashlight, but before he could illuminate the darkness, something cold and clinging latched onto his ankle. He stumbled, feeling a presence circle around him, intangible yet undeniably real. "Help," a whisper echoed, one he recognized as the prisoner's voice. "Help me." Fletcher screamed as shadows flooded in, crawling up his legs, unyielding and insatiable. The chilling realization struck him. The deaths weren't accidents nor mere violence. They were deliberate, the prison a breeding ground for something far darker. As he felt himself being consumed, the lights flickered back on, revealing C5's cell door wide open. The cell was empty, save for his shadows floating away from the light. There would be no survivors tonight, only another name to add to the grim history of Raven's Hollow. And outside, the wind continued to howl, as if in sorrow for the souls claimed in the darkness. Number 8. The soft, eerie glow of the moon barely penetrated the tangled remnants of ivy and rusted iron that shrouded the abandoned industrial building. Once a bustling factory echoing with the sounds of machinery, it now stood apart as a decaying monument to time, an unwanted relic at the edge of town. Jake, an amateur urban explorer, had heard whispers of its haunted past, the stories of workers who vanished without a trace, and echoes of anguished cries that lingered within its walls. Equipped with nothing but a flashlight and a backpack filled with snacks, he stepped through a gaping hole in the decrepit facade. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. His boots crunched against shattered glass and crumbling concrete as he moved deeper into the building, his heart racing with excitement and trepidation. Shadows crept along the walls, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to flicker at the corner of his vision. He quickly brushed aside the creeping unease, attributing it to his imagination. With each step, he descended further into the heart of the factory, following the murmur of what he thought was a distant wind, coaxing him on like a siren song. As he ventured deeper, the environment shifted. The air grew colder and more stagnant. The machinery loomed like skeletal sentinels in the dark, covered in layers of rust. Jake's flashlight flickered ominously, and he tightened his grip on it, feeling a palpable tension in the air. Suddenly, a sound pierced through the silence, a faint whimper echoing from below. The noise clawed at his curiosity, pulling him toward a rusted metal staircase leading down into darkness. On the damp, creaking steps, each footfall reverberated like a drumbeat in the silence. A vast, cavernous chamber that had once been the epicenter of the factory's operation. Chains hung from the ceiling like skeletal remains, swinging slightly, though there was no breeze to move them. Jake's heart raced. The whimper echoed again, and he followed it into the depths. As he reached a small alcove, he stumbled upon something remarkable. An old control panel flickered to life with dim lights, illuminating a scene of horror. The wall was lined with photographs of workers, their eyes hollow, mouths open in eternal silent screams. The culmination of dread settled in his chest as he saw not just men and women, but blurred faces, morphed and twisted, almost as if the building itself had devoured them. A chilling realization coursed through him. These were not mere photographs. They were warnings, remnants of lost souls entrapped within the industrial behemoth. The webcam-like monitors that flickered around the room displayed dark figures moving in the dim corridors of the factory, their movements jerky and unnatural. Then the whimper turned into a howl, a deafening sound that bounced off the concrete walls. Fear pricking at his skin, Jake turned to leave, but the shadows solidified, coalescing into a mass, a churning darkness that blocked his path. The air grew thick, heavy with dread as he felt unseen eyes bore into him. With terror gripping his heart, he ran, racing up the steps, only to find that the way behind him had vanished. Brick walls surged where the exit had been. The howls grew louder, a cacophony of the damned. They beckoned him forth, urging him to join their ranks. Jake's flashlight flickered and died, plunging him into absolute darkness. Alone, he could only hear the echo of his own breathing and the ghastly chorus that whispered his name in the deep, reminding him that in the belly of a beast, terror never truly dies. It merely waits for another soul to swallow.
Lila stared up at the weathered brick of her new apartment complex, a sense of dread pooling in her stomach. She had imagined her first place would be a cozy sanctuary, filled with laughter and freedom. Instead, the building loomed like a forgotten relic, its windows dark and vacant. Shaking off her unease, she adjusted the boxes in her arms and pushed through the heavy door. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of damp wood and mildew. The narrow hallway stretched ahead, punctuated by flickering fluorescent lights. Lila's apartment was on the third floor, a small one-bedroom that she had managed to secure after a frantic search. She made her way upstairs, the worn staircase creaking beneath her feet, echoing her apprehensions. As she unpacked, odd sensations whispered at the edges of her awareness. In the stillness, she could almost hear the walls breathe, like a hidden presence that wasn't quite right. She dismissed these feelings as paranoia, remnants of sleep deprivation and the weight of moving. Later that evening, Lila settled onto her couch, a tattered thing that her friend had forgotten to take back. The TV flickered to life, casting dancing shadows across the walls. But she soon sensed she wasn't alone. A chilling breeze swept through the room, ruffling the strands of her hair. Her skin prickled and she turned, expecting to find a window ajar, only to find all the windows firmly shut. That night she dreamt of long-forgotten whispers, voices tangled in anguish. They called her name, a mournful melody echoing through the muted landscape. A woman with hollow eyes and a gaping mouth reached for her, the dark abyss of her figure swallowing the light. Lila awoke, her heart racing, the echoes of those voices pressed heavily on her mind. Over the coming days, Lila's unease transformed into certainty. The apartment complex was haunted. The lights flickered more frequently, and strange noises reverberated during the witching hour. Unidentifiable thumps and soft crying. Other tenants drifted silently past her, their faces pale, expressions vacant. She felt their eyes upon her, judgment passed from the shadows. Determined to confront the madness, Lila ventured into the basement one evening, guided by her relentless curiosity. The air grew colder as she descended, and with each step the smell of decay intensified. The flickering bulb overhead dimmed, casting eerie shapes on the damp concrete. As she reached the bottom, she heard it. A soft, muted sobbing. Following the sound, she entered a small, forgotten room lined with faded photographs. Each face told a story of sorrow. Each visage was a ghost, trapped in the sorrow of the place. Lila's breath hitched as the sobbing became a chorus of voices, their words indistinct yet insistent. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the room, and the air shimmered. The ethereal forms of the tenants emerged from the walls, their anguished expressions imploring her to understand. "Help us," they whispered in unison, their voices clawing at Lila's sanity. "Break the cycle. We are bound to this place." Lila stumbled back, terror coursing through her veins. With the spirits circling her, the unsettling truth sank in. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a curse. One that promised the same fate to anyone who dared live in their once vibrant home. Heart pounding, Lila bolted up the stairs, fleeing the building. Outside, dawn broke with an ominous hue. The once safe haven, now a prison of spirits. She turned to take one last look at the apparition of her new life, the whispers still echoing, warning her that some places can never be escaped. The shadows of the past loomed, everlasting, just waiting for the next soul to call their home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting elongated shadows over the time-worn gravestones, Ethan felt a thrill of both excitement and trepidation. He had heard the tales that surrounded Hollow Creek Cemetery, tales of restless spirits roaming the grounds, compelling the living to confront their deepest fears. But as a young adult recently enamored with the idea of ghost hunting, Ethan believed he could unearth the truth behind the legend. With a flashlight in hand, he crossed the iron gate, its creaking hinges echoing through the still evening air. The scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filled his lungs as he stepped onto the uneven path. Most of the headstones were cracked and weathered, some almost swallowed by creeping ivy, but one caught his attention. A large, ornate grave adorned with an angel figure holding a mourning veil. The inscription read, "Here lies Clara Montgomery, taken too soon." Ethan crouched down, his curiosity piqued. He ran his fingers over the stone, tracing the letters. It was said that Clara had vanished one night, only to be found dead weeks later, her spirit forever searching for closure. "Clara," Ethan whispered into the thickening darkness, half-jokingly. A chill swept through the air, causing him to shiver unexpectedly. He took a deep breath, dismissing the feeling as mere anxiety, and stood up, brushing the dirt from his jeans. As he ventured deeper into the cemetery, the silence grew oppressive. The moon hung high, illuminating an uneven path that twisted like a serpent through the old graves. Every rustle of leaves seemed magnified, and the soft hoot of an owl echoed ominously in the stillness. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind blew through the trees, extinguishing Ethan's flashlight. Darkness enveloped him like a shroud. Heart racing, he fumbled to turn the flashlight back on, panic beginning to seep in. The beam flickered back to life, casting a weak light that revealed swirling fog advancing through the gravestones. "Okay, this is just my imagination," he muttered, trying to shake off his rising dread. But something drew his gaze toward the far corner of the cemetery, a silhouette partially obscured by the mist. Ethan took a cautious step forward. The figure was dressed in a flowing white gown, hair cascading around her shoulders, and while she appeared to be leaning against a grave, her face was hidden beneath a veil. "Clara?" he called tentatively, feeling his voice tremble. The figure lifted her head, revealing hollow eyes and an anguished expression that seemed frozen in time. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. She pointed toward him, lips moving silently as if pleading for something. Ethan took another step back, ready to turn and run when he felt an icy grip around his wrist. He whipped around to find nothing but empty air. The world began to tilt and swirl, shadows dancing menacingly. He stumbled, realizing the ground beneath him was crumbling away. "Help me," the whisper echoed, slithering into his ears. The voice was Clara's, filled with sorrow. Desperation clawed at his insides as he looked back at her, the expression on her face shifting from pleading to one of anger and despair. "Why are you here?" But before he could grasp an answer, the ground opened up and he fell, swallowed by darkness. The cemetery grew still once more, the mist retreating as Clara's figure vanished into the void, leaving only a single gravestone intact. "Here lies Ethan Parker, taken too soon." The night air hung thick with fog as Clara, Tessa, Margot, and Evan ventured deeper into the old cemetery. They'd been looking for a thrill, and Halloween offered the perfect excuse. It was rumored that the old Hartley mausoleum was open, a relic of a family steeped in mystery and misfortune. The streets felt alive with whispers, and their laughter echoed, mingling with the rustling leaves. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Clara asked, hesitating as the others pressed onward. "Come on, it's just an old stone box," Tessa teased, her voice radiating confidence. She had been daring everyone all night, spinning tales of ghosts and restless spirits to mask her own anxiety. "Let's just check it out," Margot shrugged, and Evan nodded eagerly. "It'll be fun." As they approached the moss-covered structure, the air grew noticeably cooler, a shiver crawling up Clara's spine. The mausoleum loomed before them, its stone entrance marred by cracks and deep shadows that seemed to breathe with the wind. The heavy door, usually sealed shut, swung open with a creak that reverberated through the silence like an angry whisper. "Maybe it's a sign," Clara muttered, though the thrill of curiosity pulled her closer to the entrance. "Or maybe it's an invitation," Tessa quipped, stepping into the dark maw. "You scared?" With hesitant steps they followed her inside. Flickering light from their cell phones illuminated the interior, revealing weathered stone walls lined with crypts. The scent of damp earth mixed with decay, and Clara's heart raced. This wasn't just a tomb. It felt as if they had walked into the belly of some long slumbering beast. Evan's beam swept across an inscription above one of the crypts. Evan's beam swept across an inscription above one of the crypts, catching the attention of Marco. "Look at this," he called. "It's the Hartleys. They say they were cursed by the spirits of their enemies." "Did you read that in one of those ghost stories?" Tessa asked, rolling her eyes. The others were captivated, listening intently as Marco recited the legends he had gleaned from articles and local folklore. As he spoke, the air thickened, drawing tighter around them. Clara could feel a looming presence, a weight hiding just beyond their sight. "This was a mistake," she murmured, clutching her phone tighter. Suddenly, a loud noise erupted from the back of the mausoleum, a clattering sound like bones rattling against stone. The group froze, eyes wide with terror. "What was that?" Evan whispered, his voice barely escaping his throat. "I don't know, but we should get out of here," Clara insisted, slowly backing toward the entrance. But the silence returned, only to shatter again, this time accompanied by an eerie low moan that seemed to echo from the depths of the mausoleum. Shadows shifted against the walls, and Clara could swear she saw figures emerging from the crypts. Pale, gaunt forms straining to break free from their eternal slumber. "Run!" Marco screamed, and panic surged through them as they dashed toward the exit. The door slammed shut with a resounding thud just as they reached it, trapping them inside. Tessa screamed, clawing at the door as muffled voices filled the air, a chorus of angry whispers growing louder and more volatile. The friends fell silent, their breath hitching as the crypts around them trembled, and they realized they were not alone. The curse of the Hartleys had awakened, and it craved more than just the past. It craved their very souls. The sun dipped below the horizon as four friends, Ella, Tom, Jake, and Mia, pulled up to the rusted gate of the old Farmer Willard's abandoned farm. Rumors swirled around the local high school about the place, whispers of ghostly encounters, supernatural happenings, that had transformed it into a rite of passage for thrill-seeking teens. Tonight, they were ready to see for themselves. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Mia asked, her voice trembling slightly. She clutched her flashlight, casting jittery beams across the overgrown land. "Come on, it'll be fun," Jake replied, smirking. The adrenaline buzzed through him. "What's the worst that could happen?" With a lack of convincing arguments, they ventured inside. Weeds twisted around the fence posts, and the air felt cooler, heavy with the scent of decay. The old farmhouse loomed ahead, its paint flaking off like ancient skin. They stepped cautiously onto the creaking porch, the wood groaning as if in protest. "Let's check out the barn first," Tom said, his excitement palpable. They hoisted open the barn door, which protested with a low moan. Inside, it was a time capsule of neglect. Tools lay scattered like forgotten memories, and a thick layer of dust blanketed every surface. Mia turned her flashlight toward the wall, revealing faded photographs pinned up like trophies. A family once lived here, she thought, seeing smiling faces from a bygone era. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed behind them. They jumped, spinning to face the barn door swinging ominously. "Dude, it's just the wind," Tom said, although his bravado wavered. They trudged deeper into the shadows, their nerves sharp. As they explored, Ella's flashlight flickered, and she felt a sudden chill creep up her spine. "Guys, did you feel that?" "Feel what?" Jake scoffed, but a shiver raced down his arms. "Stop messing around." Moments later, they descended into the crypt-like cellar, descending a rickety staircase that led into darkness. The air was stagnant and cold. A lone flickering bulb swung from the ceiling, creating a dance of shadows that seemed to laugh at them. "Isn't this where the kids went missing?" Mia whispered. ringing the name in their heads like a silent bell. Feeling a thrill of unease, they whispered amongst themselves until a soft, muffled noise echoed from the far corner of the cellar. They froze, hearts pounding. "Did you hear that?" Ella asked, eyes wide. "Probably just a rat," Jake said, though his voice was shaky. Curiosity piqued, they crept toward the sound. As they reached the corner, the light revealed an old wooden chest. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder, charged with a strange energy. The clinking of old change pierced the silence. Frantic whispers became screams as Ella opened the chest. Inside lay tattered clothes, filthy and sinister. But what gripped them was something far worse. A matted jumble of hair intertwined with bones. They stumbled back, horror crashing over them like a flood. "The kids!" Mia gasped. Suddenly a laugh filled the air, a ghastly sound that didn't belong to the living. Shadows coalesced at the edge of their light, figures with hollow eyes emerging from the darkness. "Run!" Tom shouted. But the cellar door slammed shut, sealing them within the tomb of despair. Panic erupted as the specters drew closer. Trapped in their darkest fear, they realized the tales of the farm weren't merely stories, they were warnings. And in that fleeting moment, they understood each forgotten soul was a part of the land, eager to collect new company. Samantha Jones clocked in at the call center just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the rows of cubicles. It had been 2 months since she had started this tedious job, and already the monotony gnawed at her like a relentless pit bull. The ringing phones blurred into an endless drone. But that evening there was something different in the air, a chill that sent shivers down her spine. As she settled into her cubicle, a screeching ring echoed in the silence. It was just past midnight, the time when the volume of calls typically dwindled. "Hello, thank you for calling tech support. This is Samantha. How can I help you?" she answered, her voice steady despite the unease crawling over her skin. Static crackled through the receiver. Then came a voice, a child's giggle that morphed into a harsh whisper. "Help me." Samantha's heart raced. "I'm sorry, can you repeat that?" she asked, her attempt at professionalism faltering. Another voice chimed in, this one deeper and more sibilant. "Somewhere dark. Help me." Samantha's fingers froze above the keyboard. Her co-workers, scattered like ghostly apparitions, were preoccupied with their calls, oblivious to the sounds emanating from her headset. She disconnected the line, shaking her head as if to clear out the remnants of fright. Just a prank, she reassured herself. The night wore on, with call after call coming in, yet she couldn't shake that lingering disquiet. It felt as if unseen eyes were watching her, waiting for the right moment to strike. Hours later, her phone rang again, a number she didn't recognize, the one that emitted a faint glow in the dim light. With hesitant fingers, she answered. "Tech support, Samantha speaking." Only silence followed. She raised an eyebrow, about to end the call, when a whisper broke through. "We're here, Samantha. Why won't you help?" She slammed the phone down, her heart hammering in her chest. The weight of their words pressed upon her, dragging her into a murky abyss of unease. Shadows warped and twisted in her peripheral vision. The cubicle walls felt too close, pressing against her like a vice. Determined to shake the feeling, Samantha stepped outside for a breath of fresh air. But the night air was thick, suffocating, alive with whispers that seemed to swirl around her like a cyclone. Panic clawed at her insides, and the sounds of the ensuing night made her feel small and insignificant. When she returned to her cubicle, the screen flickered ominously. There were numerous missed calls from that same unrecognized number. Dread pooled in her stomach as she dialed the number back, curiosity consuming her. A voice answered almost immediately, a choir of eerie laughter echoing in the background. "You shouldn't have done that, Samantha. We just wanted to play." Her eyes widened. The laughter echoed louder, and she felt something cold grip her neck. She twisted around, but no one was there, only the shadows morphing into grotesque shapes. Samantha dropped the phone, freezing as the screen reflected her haunted visage surrounded by swirling dark figures. The spirits, once playmates from another realm, loomed closer, their laughter transforming into an unbearable cacophony. "Help us," they intoned in unison. "Reaching, reaching." With a scream strangled in her throat, Samantha realized the truth. The calls had never been about assistance. They were an invitation, a beckoning to join the chorus of the damned. In that moment, she understood. She wouldn't just be another call center worker. She would become a ghost in the machine, eternally trapped in a cycle of whispers and laughter, forever calling out for help in the dark. The cloying smell of antiseptic and aging furniture lingered in the air as Clara stepped into the Serenity Pines nursing home. She had worked as a certified nursing assistant for 3 years, embracing the challenges and the heartaches of caring for the elderly. The residents were her family, though their stories were sometimes steeped in sorrow. One evening, as Clara completed her rounds, she noticed a new patient named Miss Thompson. She was frail, her white hair a halo against her pillow, and her eyes, though dim, sparkled with a hint of mischief. Clara had always found humor and warmth in her patients, but Miss Thompson's presence felt off. It wasn't just her frailty, it was the way her gaze lingered just beyond Clara's shoulder, as if something unseen beckoned in the shadows. "Everything all right, Miss Thompson?" Clara asked, brushing a loose strand of hair from her patient's forehead. "Oh, darling," Miss Thompson whispered, her voice barely audible. "They always come at night." "Who, Miss Thompson?" Clara leaned closer, her curiosity piqued. But the old woman smiled weakly and turned her gaze back to the window, where the pale moonlight filled the room with unearthly shades. That night, Clara found herself restless. She tossed and turned in her small staff room, but some instinct pulled her to the common area. As she wandered through the dimly lit halls, she felt a chill skating across her skin. The moonlight dappled the floor, casting shadows that flickered like flame. She rounded a corner and paused. Miss Thompson was sitting in her usual chair, staring out into the darkness. "Miss Thompson, shouldn't you be in bed?" Clara approached cautiously. "It's not my time yet, dear," Miss Thompson replied, her voice now a whisper among the silence. "But they're waiting." "Who? What do you mean?" Clara's heart raced. But she felt drawn to the old woman, an unseen tether binding her. "They're so lonely," Miss Thompson said, her gaze still entrenched in the shadows. "They just want someone to care." Before Clara could ask further, a cold gust swept through the common area. Before Clara could ask further, a cold gust swept through the common area. The light flickered, and she glimpsed a figure, a translucent woman dressed in a tattered hospital gown, seated in the corner, her face a mask of sorrow. "Help," the ghostly figure mouthed, but no sound escaped her lips. Clara stumbled back, her instincts screaming to flee. Yet as she turned, she saw Miss Thompson's knowing smile. "Help them, Clara, they need you," she urged, an ember of urgency palpable in her tone. The specters took form in her mind, each with a story of lost love, forgotten promises, and lives left unfinished. Recognizing the hearts aching around her, Clara approached the somber figures, whispering their names and the wishes she had learned from her patients. As dawn broke, the figures began to fade, and with each whispered promise of remembrance, Clara felt warmth returning to the chilly air. Miss Thompson's laughter rang, riding the soft morning breeze. "Thank you, dear," she said, her body shimmering in the dawn light. "I can finally rest." Clara awoke the next morning with a newfound resolve. It wasn't just a nursing home. It was a sanctuary, a bridge between the worlds, where even the lost could be cared for. And she vowed to honor those ghostly souls, one touch, one whisper at a time. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as the night shift settled in at Silver Pines Hospital. Despite the chaos of the emergency room, laughter occasionally broke through the tension, a testament to the camaraderie of the small crew. Dr. Maya Chen, a dedicated resident, caught a glimpse of her watch. 2:37 a.m. Just 2 more hours left, she thought, grateful that the night had been relatively quiet thus far. That's when the doors swung open with a crash, and in stumbled a wheezing figure, an elderly man, pale as a ghost. Maya and her colleague, Nurse Sarah Hudson, sprang into action. The man collapsed onto a gurney, his breath ragged and eyes wide with fear. "Get a pulse," Maya urged, starting chest compressions while Sarah fumbled for the monitor. The man's heart, however, betrayed him. Flatline. They worked furiously, administering shocks and medications, but he succumbed. The monitor beeped an eternity of sterile silence. With a heavy heart, Maya looked at the monitor and said, "Time of death, 2:45 a.m." Sarah placed a gentle hand on the man's shoulder, uttering a quiet prayer, then turned her attention back to the patients still waiting in the crowded ER. As the bustle returned and the team began to tidy up, a chill swept through the room. At first, they thought nothing of it. The overactive air conditioning, or last night's autumn storm, perhaps. But then, Sarah noticed a shimmering figure standing near the nurse's station, a translucent woman dressed in a flowing white gown. The figure's eyes were wide, filled with an otherworldly sorrow. "Is that—" Sarah began, her voice trailing off. The specter seemed to nod in affirmation. Maya, oblivious to the commotion, shouted for another patient who had just arrived, an anxious teenager with a dislocated shoulder. As Sarah blinked, the ghost reached out an ethereal hand. "Maya, wait," she stammered. "This woman, she needs help." "Help?" Maya frowned, looking at the ghost, then back at Sarah in bewilderment. "She's dead." The ghost sighed, and in a voice soft as the wind rustling through the trees, she whispered, "I cannot leave until I know my husband is safe." The hospital was filled with patients now, but the specter hovered closer to the gurney where they had placed the elderly man. Maya felt an odd sense of empathy. They had failed the old man, but perhaps they could still help his ghostly companion. Okay, Maya said, collecting her thoughts. "What do you need us to do?" With a flicker of her hand, the specter pointed towards the far end of the ER, past the busy nurses and doctors. "Please, find him." Heart pounding, Maya and Sarah moved through the throng of patients. After a relentless search, they found another room containing a frail old man, lost in a daze, and utterly unaware of his wife's passing. The realization hit Maya like a punch to the gut. It was the ghost's husband. "Maya, can you feel it?" Sarah whispered as they introduced themselves to the man. "She's here, with us." As they tended to both men, the ghost smiled for the first time, her translucent figure shimmering with gratefulness. The air grew warmer around her, and Maya saw her husband's eyes clear as he finally sensed his wife's presence. "We won't let you go until he's ready," Maya promised. And at that moment, she sensed the bond that transcended the realms of life and death. In the quiet confines of the hospital, amidst the chaos of the living, they cared for not just the body, but the spirit, proving that love has no boundaries, even in the face of horror. The night was warm, the moon a silver coin hanging lazily in the sky. A group of 5 friends, Maya, Jake, Alex, Lily, and Tom, huddled around a flickering campfire deep in the dense woods, eager to escape the mundane of everyday life. They shared ghost stories, their laughter mingling with the rustling leaves and chirping crickets. As the embers faded into ash, curiosity got the better of them. "Let's explore the old chapel," Maya suggested, her eyes gleaming with excitement. The chapel had been abandoned for decades, its walls cloaked in rumors of dark rituals and ghostly whispers. "We should stick to the path," Tom warned, anxiety creeping into his voice. The lure of adventure proved irresistible. The group trekked deeper into the woods, their flashlights barely cutting through the heavy darkness. As they approached the chapel, an uneasy feeling settled over them. Ivy clung to its stone facade, and twisted branches stretched toward the sky like skeletal fingers. Inside, dust motes danced in their beams, revealing weathered pews and shattered stained-glass windows. A chill swept through the air, sending shivers down their spines. Just as they were about to leave, they heard a low chant echoing from the adjacent clearing. Curiosity piqued, they crept to the edge of the trees, hearts racing in unison. What they saw sent ice coursing through their veins. A circle of hooded figures stood in the clearing, illuminated by flickering candles. Their voices intertwined, a sinister cadence that rippled through the night air. In the center lay an altar, draped with strange symbols in a darkened wooden box. Lily gasped, barely stifling a scream. "We should go!" She tugged at Alex's arm, but he was entranced. "They're doing something," he whispered, captivated by the chanting. As if sensing their presence, one of the cultists paused and turned, the hood casting shadows over their face. The group flinched, retreating further into the safety of the trees, but dread rooted them, and they felt compelled to remain. The chanting grew louder, more urgent. A wind whipped through the clearing, extinguishing some of the candles. The cultists raised their arms in unison, murmuring words that twisted the air into a palpable tension. As if in response, the wooden box on the altar began to thrum, a low, resonant hum that seemed to pulse with life. "Maya, we need to leave, now!" Jake exclaimed, his fear rippling through them. But it was too late. The sky darkened, clouds swirling above like an angry maelstrom. Tendrils of shadow began to seep from the wooden box, slithering toward the friends. In a frenzy, they turned to flee, darting back toward the trail, but the shadows twisted together and formed grotesque shapes, blocking their path. They stumbled, gasping, trying to locate the way back as the cultists chanted louder, a war drum crescendo that threatened to drive them mad. With each heartbeat, the shadows grew bolder, grasping at their ankles, pulling them into the ground. Tom's scream pierced the air as he was jerked backward, swallowed by darkness. Panic engulfed the remaining friends. Maya, wide-eyed and frantic, turned toward the spirits of the trees, imploring them for mercy. But the shadows were hungry. The remaining friends sprinted toward the chapel, the chanting relentless behind them, their own breaths shadowed by an ancient hunger. All they had wanted was a thrill, an adventure. Instead, they had drawn the ire of something that had long been dormant, waiting for foolish souls to wander too close. As the darkness swallowed the woods, the last flicker of the campfire extinguished. Laughter turned to screams, and screams faded into the wind, leaving only silence and shadows. In the small, fog-laden town of Ravenswood, where the chill of autumn settled in early, and patches of thick mist danced over the landscape, Mortimer Hargrove tended to the centuries-old cemetery that held within its boundaries the secrets of the deceased. His job as the caretaker was more than mere maintenance of the grave markers and plots. It was a peculiar covenant he had struck with the spirits lingering in the shadows, guiding their restless souls toward peace. Mortimer was a gaunt figure, his skin pale as the moonlight that filtered through the twisted branches of the ancient oaks. He wore a tattered black coat, fraying at the edges, and his fingers were calloused from years of digging and planting. He carried a rusted metal spade which had been passed down in his family for generations, its blade stained with the soil of countless burial plots. As dusk fell, he immersed himself in his work, humming a haunting melody that echoed through the stillness of the cemetery. Each fragment of the song harmonized with the whispers of the spirits circling around him, drawn to the warmth of his presence. Mortimer knew each of them by name, a respect he paid that kept their fury, built from years of neglect, at bay. He honored them with fresh flowers gathered from nearby woods, carefully placing them on their graves as if he were attending a tea party for the lost. But tonight felt different. A thick fog rolled in, obscuring the moonlight and draping the cemetery in shadows. As his spade bit into the cold earth, an unsettling chill raced down his spine. Mortimer paused, sensing a disturbance among the spirits, and the air grew heavy with discontent. He instinctively glanced at the neglected corners of the cemetery, where the oldest plots lay in disrepair and the names on the gravestones had been worn to indecipherable etchings. An unsettling rustle echoed through the cemetery. Mortimer's heart quickened as he saw a figure materialize between the ancient tombstones. A woman in a tattered white gown, her face obscured by a veil of hair. Her moans intertwined with the fog, calling for help and summoning the heartbreak of a long-lost love. "I am here," Mortimer responded softly, trying to ease her tormented spirit. "What do you need?" But the ground trembled beneath him, threatening to rise up and swallow all remnants of peace. The very earth cloyed with unresolved grief, and the other spirits began to stir violently, as if swayed by her sorrow. The once harmonious melody within him faded, replaced by tumultuous cries for release. "Free me!" the woman cried, her voice like ice scraping against stone. "I cannot find him!" His gut twisted with dread as he carefully approached her. "Who do you seek?" He dared not ask her name, fearing the darker truths that might flood into being. "Mortimer," she gasped, her ghostly hands reaching out to him. "My heart is buried beneath the heavy stones. You must bring him back, or I shall forever haunt this ground." Realizing the weight of her plea, Mortimer felt the pressure of the spirits climbing around him, writhing in desperation. With a heavy heart, he turned to the neglected corners of the cemetery. "I will help you. I promise." But even as he spoke, the warning flashed in his mind. Some spirits were never meant to be disturbed. As Mortimer grasped his spade, he sensed the encroaching darkness creeping from the corners of the graveyard, drawn forth by the woman's torment, ready to awaken the slumbering wrath of those who had long since passed. The sun dipped beneath the horizon as Ellie adjusted her camera, eager to capture the fading light filtering through the twisted branches of the pine trees. "What's up, guys? It's your girl Ellie," she chirped into the lens, her excitement barely masking the shiver that ran down her spine. "Today, I'm in Blackwood Forest, home to haunting legends and lost souls. Just look at this place." The camera swung around to reveal a mosaic of gnarled roots and thick underbrush, shadows creeping in to swallow the remnants of daylight. Ellie had heard the stories, of course. Locals spoke in hushed tones about people who ventured into the forest, only to come out changed, if they emerged at all. "Okay, so legend has it," she continued, a hint of bravado masking her unease, "there are spirits lurking here. Some say they're the echoes of those who have gotten lost, forever trapped in this twisted maze. Pretty creepy, right?" Ellie giggled despite the tension in the air. Vlogging was all about entertainment after all, and she needed to keep her followers engaged. The last few uploads had been met with lukewarm enthusiasm, and she wanted something fresh, something thrilling to pull in viewers. As the light dimmed further, Ellie pressed on, guiding her fans deeper into the forest. In the back of her mind, flickers of self-doubt crept in, but she shook them away. "You guys are in for a wild ride today," she said, her voice tinged with nervousness, but also tinged with excitement nonetheless. The forest seemed to close in around her, shadows stretching like fingers across the ground. She would later blame her hastening heartbeat on the chill of dusk. Her flashlight flickered on, illuminating the path ahead, the beam quivering with every jagged movement. "Whoa! Check this out!" She pointed the camera at a colossal tree, its bark gnarled and twisted, resembling a grotesque face contorted in agony. A chill raced through her, but she brushed it off as a mere trick of the imagination. She had come for the thrills after all, and a little haunted scenery was part of the allure. But as she moved deeper, the air grew heavier, more oppressive. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, whispering secrets she couldn't understand. She glanced around, heart pounding. "It's getting a little intense in here, you guys," she admitted, forcing a laugh. Involuntarily, her eyes drifted toward a dense thicket. Something seemed to stir there, a rustle, a sigh. She felt the urge to turn back, but a dreadful curiosity propelled her forward. "Let's check it out," she said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. As she edged closer, the shadows grew darker, thickening as if they were alive. An eerie, disembodied whisper floated through the trees. "Leave," it urged, a voice both raspy and alluring. Ellie's pulse quickened. She was captivated by the sound, willing to ignore the primal instinct screaming at her to flee. "Did you guys hear that?" she stammered, her bravado crumbling. The forest felt alive, the trees leaning in closer, drawn by an unseen force. Then, just as Ellie wheeled her camera to capture the moment, it happened. The ground beneath her quaked, and the whispers rose to a cacophony of voices. The faces in the bark twisted grotesquely, eyes pleading for release. The weight of sorrow crashed down upon her. "Get out!" The final plea echoed within her mind as she stumbled backward, heart racing. The forest surged, and the darkness enveloped her, shadows swallowing her whole as Ellie's camera tumbled to the ground, forever recording her last moments in Blackwood Forest. The sun was just beginning to dip below the horizon, casting vibrant hues of orange and pink across the sky as Mia and Jake cruised down a desolate stretch of highway. Summer break had just begun, and the thrill of a spontaneous road trip filled the air with excitement. They were both high on freedom, leaving behind the confines of textbooks and dorm rooms for the open road. "No GPS signal out here," Jake chuckled, glancing at his phone. "Guess we're really off the beaten path." Driven by curiosity and a sense of adventure, they veered off the main road when they spotted a sign proclaiming "Evelyn's Diner, 3 miles ahead." With grumbling stomachs, they decided to check it out, unaware of the shadow lurking beneath the surface of their light-hearted journey. As they approached, the diner emerged from the dusky embrace of overgrown trees, its neon sign flickering weakly as if it were struggling to stay alive. The building itself was a faded relic, with chipped paint and an unsettling stillness that loomed over it. Yet the promise of food was enticing, and they stepped inside. The air inside felt thick and stale, the faint smell of grease permeating their senses. An old jukebox, curiously silent, occupied a corner, its dust-covered surface indicating it hadn't been touched in years. A waitress with an unsettling wide smile greeted them. Her name tag read Evelyn. "Welcome to Evelyn, dears. What can I get you?" Her voice was honeyed, but seemed to echo unnaturally in the empty space. Mia exchanged a wary glance with Jake. We'll just have a couple of burgers and fries." "Of course," Evelyn chirped, disappearing into the kitchen, her gait strangely fluid, as if she were gliding rather than walking. As they waited, an odd sense of foreboding crept in. The diner, though deserted, felt alive. They could hear murmurs from the kitchen, low chuckles that sent chills up their spines. Mia shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "This place is kinda creepy." "Just some small-town weirdness," Jake shrugged. "It adds character." But even he couldn't shake the hair-raising feeling settling in his gut. When their food arrived, the burgers were colossal, juices dripping down the sides as Evelyn set them down with an almost reverent air. But something about them didn't look right. Too red beneath the bun, too raw. "Oh, it looks good." Mia forced a smile, but the sight made her stomach churn. The diner began to feel like a maze as they chewed in silence, the flicker of the neon sign outside casting strange shadows on their faces. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the back room. The bubbling chatter they had heard faded into frenzied laughter, then muffled cries. We should go, Mia said. But as they stood, the room felt tighter, the air thicker. They rushed toward the door, but Evelyn stood in front of it, her smile now too wide, her eyes gleaming with a predatory glint. Leaving so soon? But you've barely started your meal. Jake tried to push past her, but her grip was unyielding. No, we have to! But the moment stretched into eternity, the diner morphing into a surreal nightmare. Echoing laughter surrounded them, and silhouettes began to emerge from the shadows, faces jammed into grotesque joy. As the lights flickered violently overhead, Mia and Jake understood. They had stumbled into a twisted ritual, their summer escape spiraling into darkness. The diner was alive, feeding, and they were the next course. On a sweltering summer day, the sun hung high in the sky as Mia and Clara sped down the two-lane highway, their laughter floating out of the open windows of Clara's old sedan. They were on a spontaneous road trip, an escape from the mundane routines of their lives, eager to seek adventure. The chatter faded as the landscape transformed from bustling towns to the dense embrace of towering pines and rolling hills. "Turn here!" Clara exclaimed, pointing at the dusty road barely visible between the trees. It was a whim, born of impulsive joy, and Mia nodded, their spirits lifted by the promise of discovery. The narrow road wound deeper into the woods, surrounded by a thick canopy of leaves, casting a dappled shadow on the car's interior. Time slipped away as they drove, filled with jokes and playful bickering, until suddenly the trees parted to reveal a small cabin nestled in a clearing, a timber structure weathered by time and entwined with creeping vines. "It looks abandoned," Mia said, eyeing the chipped paint and sagging roof. "Should we check it out?" Clara's curiosity piqued. "Are you kidding? This is perfect," she replied, already unbuckling her seatbelt. They shared a mischievous grin before stepping out into the humid air, the scent of earth and moss enveloping them. The silence was palpable as they approached the cabin. Wooden planks creaked underfoot, and the door hung ajar, a gaping mouth inviting secrets. "Let's go inside," Clara whispered, dragging Mia along before she could protest. Inside, the cabin was dark and shadowy, with dust motes swirling in the filtered light that crept through grimy windows. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and the air felt thick, heavy. A fireplace stood cold and empty, surrounded by mismatched chairs that seemed to whisper forgotten tales. As they explored the cluttered room, Clara stumbled upon an old trunk. "Help me with this," she urged, and they pried the rusted lock free. Inside lay a curious assortment of objects: tattered clothing, brittle newspapers, and a collection of odd trinkets. A small, strange doll with glassy eyes sat atop the pile, its smile too wide and unsettling. "This is creepy," Mia said, drawing back. Clara picked up the doll, turning it over in her hands. "It's just a doll. It's kinda cute." But Mia felt a chill as she observed the doll's gaze seemed fixated on her. Just then, a soft scratching echoed from the back of the cabin, halting their curiosity in its tracks. "Did you hear that?" Mia whispered, her heart racing. Clara nodded slowly, her grip tightening around the doll. "Let's check it out," Clara insisted, though her voice trembled slightly. They moved cautiously toward the source of the sound. The back door stood slightly ajar, creaking eerily with each hesitant step they took. As they peered outside, the atmosphere shifted, shadows lengthened, and the light dimmed, as if the sun itself were retreating. Suddenly, cold fingers grasped Mia's heart as she spotted a figure. A woman with matted hair and hollow eyes, standing at the edge of the forest. The woman smiled, yet it was empty and devoid of warmth. "Mia," Clara whispered, backing away, but the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. The woman began to laugh, an eerie sound that echoed through the cabin. Mia and Clara turned to each other, panic rising. In that instant, they understood. They had stumbled not just upon an abandoned cabin, but a doorway to something dark, malevolent, and waiting. With a crash, the trunk burst open and the doll rolled out, its smile now a sinister grin. In that fleeting moment, Mia and Clara realized that some secrets should remain undiscovered, and some places are best left alone. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting an orange hue across the forest, Sarah and Lily hiked deeper into the woods. They had set out that morning on what was supposed to be a simple day hike, but buoyed by the thrill of the adventure, had decided to venture off the marked trail. The chatter of their laughter echoed through the trees as they climbed over gnarled roots and ducked beneath low-hanging branches, oblivious to the growing shadows. "Are you sure we should be going this way?" Lily questioned, wiping sweat from her brow. Her auburn hair bounced with each step, and she felt a mix of excitement and unease. The air had grown thick, and an unnatural stillness had settled around them. "Relax," Sarah replied, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "A little exploration never hurt anyone. Besides, it's just a couple of trees and some dirt." With one last chuckle, they forged ahead, determined to discover whatever lay beyond the familiar path. However, as the sun dipped lower, the foliage grew denser, and the sounds of the forest faded into an eerie silence. Just when their confidence began to waver, they stumbled upon the clearing. In the center sat a perfect circle of mushrooms, vibrant and luminescent in the growing gloom. They glowed faintly, casting an otherworldly light against the encroaching darkness. The air around the circle shimmered, almost as if a heavy curtain separated it from the rest of the woods. Lily shuddered involuntarily. "This is weird, right?" Sarah inched closer, eyes wide with wonder. "It's a fairy circle! I've heard about these. They're supposed to bring good luck." Reluctantly, Lily followed her friend, but a cold dread coiled in her stomach. "What if we're not supposed to be here?" "Don't be such a wuss. It's just a circle." Laughing, Sarah stepped into the circle. The moment her foot crossed the boundary, a gust of wind surged through the clearing, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else. Something rot-like and sickly sweet. Lily's heart raced. "Sarah!" But it was too late. Sarah's laughter turned into a gasp as a shroud of shadows enveloped her. The radiant mushrooms flickered and dimmed as a pale mist began to swirl around them. "Get back, Sarah!" Lily shouted, stepping back involuntarily as tendrils of shadow reached out from the circle, lashing toward her like serpents. I can't move!" Sarah cried, her voice trembling with panic. Reality warped around her, twisting into nausea-inducing patterns as she struggled against the unseen force holding her. "Let her go!" Lily screamed, her voice cracking with terror. She dashed forward but was halted by an invisible barrier just beyond the circle's edge, a gnawing sense of despair rippling through her. "This isn't real! This isn't real!" Sarah's eyes blazed with fear as she clawed frantically at the air. Lily began to back away, heart pounding. With each step, the darkness in the circle thickened, swallowing Sarah whole. The laughter from earlier now echoed as haunting whispers, a cacophony of mocking voices spiraling around her. "Join us forever." The words slithered through the air, chilling her to the bone. A final flash of Sarah's terrified face echoed in Lily's mind before silence swallowed the clearing. She turned and ran, the shadows of the forest closing in behind her. As she fled, the laughter faded, replaced by an ominous stillness, leaving only the lingering glow of the fairy circle, now forever a haunting memory etched in the depths of her mind. In the early dusk of autumn, Margaret Holloway stood before the crumbling facade of the Rookhaven Hotel. Once a luxurious retreat for the affluent, it was now a shadow of its former self, enveloped by wild, overgrown weeds and the eeriness of decades long forgotten. The locals whispered tales of vanishings and malevolent spirits that roamed its halls, but Margaret had always found comfort in the macabre. So when she stumbled upon the property at an auction, a rush of thrill pulsated through her veins. She envisioned restoring it to its former glory and perhaps unveiling its hidden past. The first night was quiet enough, the only sound being the creak of the wooden floors as the wind howled outside. She set up her sleeping arrangements in what had once been the grand ballroom, brushing off cobwebs and inhaling the familiar scent of old wood and dust. Her plans swirled in her mind, but as sleep beckoned, a sudden chill ran down her spine. It felt as though 1,000 eyes were watching, yet she dismissed it as anxiety. The next morning, Margaret awoke to the sunlight filtering through the broken windows, illuminating dust motes that danced like spirits. She made herself a cup of coffee and ventured outside for fresh air. As she stood on the broken porch, an unsettling shiver coursed through her. The hotel held secrets, and she was determined to exhume them. Days turned into weeks as she toiled alone, digging through far too many years of accumulated debris. Each evening, as she prepared to retire, the atmosphere shifted. Flickering lights cast ominous shadows, and the old radiators groaned like ghosts in anguish. The echoes of laughter meant to haunt, but it was not just sounds that struck her as off, it was the whispers that reached her ears, soft yet insistent, words she couldn't quite grasp. Desperately, she sought comfort in her renovations, pushing through her unease. However, the ghostly whimpers transformed into disembodied sighs that seemed to envelop her. One night, after another grueling day, she discovered an old ledger tucked behind a loose floorboard in a spiral of dust. Its pages were yellowed and brittle, covered in an elegant yet looping script. As she deciphered it, her heart plummeted. Names filled its entries, each paired with an unsettling note. Vanished. Lost interest. Never seen again. The final entry sent a horrifying chill through her. Claire Barnett. Last seen in the ballroom. Whispers of madness. That very night, plagued by dread, Margaret lay awake, taut and restless. Just as the clock tolled midnight, a cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing her candle. Shadows flickered against the walls, and she could hear the whispers grow clearer. They beckoned her in dark tones that churned in her chest, a mixture of pleading and warning. Margaret, join us. The pressure mounted against her chest, and her breath escaped her. In that moment, she understood. She wasn't alone. Whatever cursed this hotel had now latched onto her. Desperate to escape, she bolted towards the door, but it slammed shut, the laughter of the lost filling the air. The next morning, Rookhaven Hotel stood silent as ever, its doors shut tight. The townsfolk would find the place unchanged, oblivious to the added weight of a soul bound within its cursed walls. A new entry among the vanished, where whispers of madness now danced alongside Margaret's still unheard pleas. The old Oakwood Hotel loomed in the distance, its weathered facade bathed in the eerie glow of the setting sun. A group of 5 friends, Alice, Mark, Lucy, Tom, and Mia, had decided it was the perfect spot for their weekend getaway. Little did they know, Oakwood had been abandoned for decades, a remnant of a bygone era, whispered about in town as a place where the dead lingered. With a sense of adventure bubbling in their chests, the friends entered the lobby, the chill in the air prickling their skin. Dust motes floated in the shafts of light that broke through the grimy windows, casting ghostly shadows on the walls. A cracked bell at the front desk called out for attention, and after some hesitation, Mark rang it. The sound echoed ominously. To their surprise, an elderly man appeared, his face paled and gaunt. "Welcome to Oakwood," he muttered, his voice thin like the air around them. "The spirits are eager to meet new guests." They exchanged uneasy glances, but shrugged it off as part of the hotel's creepy charm. After checking in, they made their way down the dimly lit hallway, their footsteps muffled against the worn carpet. Rooms lined the walls, each adorned with peeling wallpaper and faded photographs of past guests, their smiling eyes now empty. As they settled into their room, laughter momentarily drowned out the oppressive silence, but a chill hung in the air, an unseen presence watching them. That night, while the group shared ghost stories, the atmosphere shifted imperceptibly. A soft whisper slithered through the room. "Stay. Forever. Tom laughed it off, but Alice felt a shiver of dread crawl up her spine. "Did you guys hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just the wind," Mia reassured her, but a cloud of unease settled over them like a weighted blanket. As the clock struck midnight, a sudden knock echoed from the door. Startled, they exchanged glances. "Who's there?" Lucy called out, her heart racing. No answer. Mark crept toward the door, his hand trembling on the knob. Maybe it's room service? He opened the door to reveal nothing but empty hallway and darkness. As he stepped back, he felt a cold rush behind him, followed by a chorus of whispers. "Stay, stay." The hotel shifted. The walls seemed to close in, and the air thickened. Mia screamed as a figure materialized in the corner. A woman in an old-fashioned gown, her face twisted in sorrow. "You'll never leave," she rasped, the words echoing with a weight of despair. Panic ensued. They rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge, as if some unseen force held it fast. The whispers grew louder, a dissonant chant promising a fate worse than death. "Stay." Alice collapsed to the floor, her breath quickening. "We need to get out," she cried. Lucy, trying to reassure her, looked around frantically for an escape. There has to be a way. But every window was barred, every door locked. Tom's face paled, and despair settled over the group as they realized the truth. They were trapped, ensnared by the spirits who roamed the halls. As the ethereal figures encircled them, their hollow eyes pleading and rageful, Alice finally whispered in stark realization, "We're just like them now. We'll never leave." In the heart of the Oakwood Hotel, laughter ceased, and the air filled with the echoes of the past. Wearied souls forever welcoming new guests to their eternal home of torment. The Travel Lodge on Route 66 had seen better days. Cracked neon signs flickered occasionally, casting erratic shadows over the peeling paint and chipped concrete. When Robert Landis accepted a job as a night clerk, he didn't expect much beyond a meager paycheck and an endless cycle of insomniac travelers. He was wrong. His first night behind the desk felt uneventful, just the buzzing of fluorescent lights and the hum of the ancient ice machine. An hour after midnight, a pair of glinting headlights pierced through the windshield, illuminating the cracked parking lot. A rusty sedan came to a halt, and an elderly man stepped out, his figure stooping and fragile. "Check in for one, please," he rasped, placing a bony hand on the desk as he filled out the registration form. Robert noticed the man's trembling fingers as he scribbled his name. "Room 7, Robert said, handing over the key with a faint smile. The old man shuffled away, mumbling incoherently. As Robert returned to his paperwork, he heard something, a low, scratching sound that seemed to emanate from beyond the walls. He paused, listening intently. The noise was like claws scraping against wood, persistent and disquieting. The sound stopped suddenly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, and the minutes crawled by. A few guests came and went, nothing out of the ordinary, until 2 a.m., when a piercing scream shattered the stillness. Robert shot up from his seat, heart racing. It came from room 7. He dashed down the dimly lit corridor, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead as he reached the door. "Sir?" he called, knocking gently. No response. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. With no answer, he pushed the door open, revealing a scene far from what he expected. The room was a mess, furniture was overturned, and the elderly man lay on the floor, eyes wide in horror, mouth agape as if he had just witnessed something unspeakable. Robert rushed to him, but something caught his eye. In the far corner, shadows seemed to twist and stretch unnaturally, coalescing into a figure just beyond perception. Before he could react, the figure lunged forward. It bore no face, just a void, a revelation of nightmares waiting to be unleashed. Robert stumbled back, heart pounding as he dragged the old man away from the figure, his instincts fighting against the surreal horror. Suddenly, another bang echoed in the corridor. His co-worker, Jackson. burst through the door, breathless. "Call 911!" he shouted. "We—" But the figure was upon them now, a swirling mass of darkness that swallowed the light whole. Jackson's scream was cut off as the figure absorbed him, leaving only the echo of terror. Robert, paralyzed with fear, scrambled to his feet and bolted for the exit, the remaining guests' doors creaking ominously, as if they, too, had heard the call of something dark. He reached the front door, but it wouldn't budge. Behind him, whispers began to fill the air, soft, enticing, promising knowledge and power, but laced with malice. He turned to face room 7, the door now standing wide open. The old man was gone, the shadows laughing, tempting him with truth. In that moment, a realization dawned. The motel wasn't simply a place of respite, it was a gateway, a trap for anyone who dared linger too long. And Robert was its newest keeper, destined to unravel the secrets of the darkness lurking within. The old Oakwood Inn had stood for decades, a relic of a bygone era, with creaky floorboards and faded wallpaper that whispered tales of all the guests who had passed through its doors. It was the kind of place where the walls seemed to breathe, drawing in secrets and exhaling shadows. Oliver, the night clerk, had manned the lobby desk for nearly a year, and while he had seen his share of eccentric travelers, he never anticipated the night he would meet the one who would haunt him for the rest of his days. It was a dreary October evening. Rain lashed against the windows, and the wind howled like a mournful spirit. Oliver sat behind the desk, flipping through a dog-eared book on local legends, half listening to the muted television that flickered in the corner. The inn had been quiet that night, a calm before the storm of Halloween. Just as he considered closing up early, the grandfather clock chimed ominously, and the front door creaked open. A chill swept through the lobby as a figure stepped inside. Oliver looked up to find a tall man, cloaked entirely in shadows, his face obscured by the brim of a wide hat.
"Good evening,"
the stranger said, his voice gravelly, smooth like dark chocolate, though it gave Oliver an inexplicable sense of dread. The man's clothing was outdated, reminiscent of a Victorian ball. "Welcome to Oakwood Inn. How can I assist you tonight?" Oliver's usual pleasantries were tinged with unease.
"I seek shelter," the stranger replied,
his smile stretching just a bit too wide.
"I'll need a room for the night."
"Of course. I just need your name and identification," Oliver said, reaching for the check-in book. The man hesitated, the flickering lights above casting unsettling shadows on his visage.
"You may refer to me as Mr. Gray," he said,
his eyes glinting with something dark and unfathomable. As Oliver scribbled the name, he stole a glance at Mr. Gray's hands. They were unnaturally long, fingers tapering into sharp points that seemed to curl and flex like dried twigs. "Room 204 will be fine," Oliver managed to say, handing over the key as an eerie shiver danced down his spine. "Do you need assistance with your bags?"
"No,"
Mr. Gray replied, turning on his heel with a fluid grace that sent a jolt of unease through Oliver. The man's long coat swept behind him like smoke as he moved toward the stairs. Hours passed, yet sleep eluded Oliver. Every creak of the inn seemed to echo louder, reverberating in the stillness. Finally, the clock struck midnight, its chimes a malicious reminder that something was off. The peace shattered when the fire alarm screamed to life, jolting Oliver from his chair. He rushed to find the source of the chaos, his heart racing. He stumbled, disoriented, down dim corridors, drawn toward the source of the alarm. As he reached room 204, the door swung open, revealing a sight that curdled his blood. Mr. Gray stood in the center of the room, the blackened walls pulsating with dread. Shadows writhed around his form like tendrils of smoke, and the air turned heavy with an ancient, suffocating malevolence. "What have you done?" Oliver gasped in horror. Mr. Gray turned slowly, his smile now a wicked grin, revealing teeth sharp and jagged.
"I bring stories, young clerk," he hissed. and the night is just beginning.
With that, he vanished into the dark, leaving Oliver alone, a witness to an unspeakable malevolence, forever trapped in the echoes of the Oakwood Inn. As the alarm faded, he realized that sometimes the stories that haunt you are not just tales, but the shadows of those who once walked among us. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a dusky glow over the desolate neighborhood of Elmwood Heights. Ivy climbed the walls of dilapidated houses, their windows clouded with dust, obscuring any sign of life within. As 18-year-old Mira strolled down the cracked pavement, earbuds nestled snugly in her ears, she brushed aside the unease that clung to the air like a thick fog. It was just another evening, and the world outside her headphones felt distant and muted. But then she heard it, a faint whimper cutting through the music. Instinct kicked in, and she pulled the earbuds out, scanning her surroundings. The sound seemed to come from behind an old flaking fence that surrounded what used to be a small park. Curiosity piqued, she stepped off the path and pushed through the overgrown brush. Nestled in the weeds was a small, dirt-caked puppy, its fur a matted brown and its eyes wide with fear. Mira knelt beside it, heart pounding. The little creature looked up, tongue lolling as if it were in desperate need of a friend. It wagged its tail, though weakly, and Mira felt a wave of compassion wash over her. "Hey there, little guy," she whispered, gently reaching out. The puppy flinched, but made no move to escape, its skinny body quivering slightly. She carefully scooped it up, cradling the trembling form against her chest. "I'll take care of you," she promised, though she couldn't help but wonder what had happened to its owner. As she turned to leave, a raspy voice echoed through the trees, sending chills down her spine. "Don't take him." Mira froze, her breath hitching as dread filled the air. The voice was laden with a darkness that echoed against the hollowed surroundings. She squinted into the twilight shadows, but there was nothing but trees and silence. Panic surged through her, but the puppy nuzzled into her embrace, grounding her. She couldn't just leave him. Urgency propelled her home, and as she settled into her modest apartment, she bathed the pup, working carefully to remove the dirt and tangles. The momentary comfort soothed them both, the little creature curling into her lap while she cradled him, whispering names. She settled on Rusty, but the inexplicable unease came creeping back through the night. As Mira turned down the lights, shadows danced across her walls. She tried to shake it off, focusing on Rusty, who was promptly curled up beside her, snoring lightly. She found herself drifting off, lulled by the steady sound. A muffled cry jolted her awake. Heart racing, she looked around, only to find the room empty. Rusty was gone. Panic surged in her chest as she jumped from her bed, scanning the room. The fuzzy outline of the puppy beneath her bed cast a stark contrast against the darkness. "Rusty?" Tentatively, she reached down and pulled him into her arms. But something felt off. He was heavier, the warmth that had surrounded them oozing away. Looking down, she gasped. Rusty's eyes had turned a sickly yellow, glassy and void of warmth, with a grinning mouth that revealed rows of jagged teeth. A low growl emanated from his throat, sending primal terror racing through her veins. The voice echoed again, closer this time.
"You shouldn't have taken him."
The lights flickered, casting shadows that twisted and elongated, revealing lurking figures among the walls, watching, waiting. And as Rusty's growl deepened, Mira realized, too late, that she wasn't just fighting to save an abandoned puppy. She had stolen something far more sinister, a darkness that thrived on desperation and fear. And in that moment, she understood. In this forsaken place, once you choose to care, you were never alone. The night air was thick with excitement as Jake, Mia, Sam, and Linda gathered at the mouth of Bone Hollow Cave. its jagged entrance yawning like the maw of a beast. The flickering glow of their headlamps illuminated the rough, damp stone walls, and the suspense crackled among them like static electricity. They had heard stories about this cave, whispers of shadows shifting and eerie echoes that didn't belong to the wind. Ignoring the warnings, their adventurous spirits guided them into the darkness. With each step deeper into the cave, the scratchy whispers grew louder in their minds, but they chalked it up to nerves. Hours slipped by as they navigated through narrow passages and wide caverns adorned with crystalline formations. The echoes of their laughter bounced off the walls, an optimistic counterpoint to the encroaching gloom. Mia, ever the inquisitive one, noticed a crevice that seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. "Guys, check this out," she shouted, her voice echoing through the damp air. The others joined her, peering into the narrow opening as a chilly breeze slipped through, carrying with it an ethereal whisper. "Is it just me, or does it feel alive?" Linda quipped, shivering despite the warmth of their gear. But curiosity outweighed caution as they squeezed through the crevice, emerging into a room of low-hanging stalactites that dripped with condensation. In the center of the chamber lay an altar of stone, etched with strange, twisting runes that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. A grotesque idol rested on the altar, its visage a terrible amalgamation of human and beast, eyes hollow and accusatory. "Guys, we shouldn't be here," Sam said, unease creeping into his voice. But before he could suggest turning back, Mia placed her hand on the idol's surface. As she did, the air turned cold and the ground trembled. "Whoa, what the?" Jake exclaimed, stepping back as the runes ignited, casting an unholy glow throughout the chamber. Shadows leapt and danced around them, growing thicker and darker. "What did you do?" Sam yelled, but before anyone could respond, the walls echoed with a guttural growl, shaking the very earth beneath them. A dark mist coiled from the idol, curling toward the friends like a snake hunting its prey. Panic set in as Linda stumbled back, her heart racing. "We need to leave," she screamed, but as they turned, the entrance to the altar room sealed shut, a wall of stone rising to trap them within. The shadows tightened their grip, and from the darkness emerged a figure of unimaginable horror, its form ever shifting, a collage of nightmares. Its eyes burned like coals, boring into them with an ancient malice. "Foolish mortals," it hissed, the voice a toxic blend of laughter and fury. "You have disturbed my slumber." As the entity loomed closer, their flashlights flickered, throwing wild shadows against the walls. Jake, filled with a sudden surge of courage, thrust his arms into the darkness, a feeble attempt to push the entity away. But it was too late. The shadows engulfed Mia first, a soundless scream trapped within the choking darkness. One by one, the entity's whispers coiled around the others, dulling their cries to echoes swallowed by the cave. Hours later, silence enveloped Bone Hollow. The altar stood undisturbed, the cursed idol gleaming once more as the whispers faded into the stone, awaiting the next group of adventurous fools who would unwittingly awaken its dark hunger.